On Wednesday, I read reporting that the infrastructure deal is dead, more or less. It looked like they couldn't figure out what the pay fors are.
That's how you know they're about to strike a deal.
Is that really true?
Yes, it's a pattern that I've observed for 15 years.
What? Why?
Because people are trying to get last minute concessions, and so if they can try to bluff that the whole thing is going to go away, then they think they can get these last minute little things given to them. And so reporters on Capitol Hill, whenever you start seeing that chaos, like it's all over, it's done, we're all going to die, there's no deal, that's when reporters are like, okay, time to pre-write the we have a deal piece, because it's coming.
Well, it's the same thing in sports, right? When there's a tough negotiation process between a player and the team, the agent will leak to the media that things are falling apart, and then the team will squeeze an extra $1 million out, right? It's very similar.
Yeah.
Okay. What was, to use that analogy, what was the extra $1 million? Do you have a sense of like what were those last things?
It was probably around the pay fors, like around the taxes. And maybe they got Democrats to cave on, there's basically no tax increases in this. And that's why people thought it was unlikely to happen, because Republicans were saying we want it to be fully paid for. Democrats were saying, great, tax the rich, tax corporations. And there's no bridging that. And so they eventually found enough kind of fake gimmicky pay-fors to cobble it together.
So what were those pay-fors in this deal? I mean, I'm less concerned about those than some of the other provisions. I mean, we haven't quite seen it all yet, but
like unspent. So the best one is they're going to close the IRS tax gap. They're going to actually spend money to go after rich people who are dodging their taxes. Probably the most absurd one is they're going to sell oil out of the petroleum reserve to fund electric buses. It's like, what are we doing? Really, we're gonna burn oil for this green infrastructure package. Okay, but that's like whatever. It might marginally decrease the price of gas, which Biden probably likes. In the very short term, it'll pop back up immediately, and you got to refine a little more gas to fill up the reserves, but which then drives up the price because then the U.S. is buying to fill its reserves. So it's kind of neutral. There's what's called asset recycling, and this is something that people need to watch very closely to try to figure out what actually gets in here. That's the new name for privatizing public assets.
Right. And there's been quite a bit written about this. I think David Dayen had a piece the other day. And you and I'm sure maybe 15 years ago, talked about what was going on in Chicago when they sold off those parking meters. That was the perfect example of the failure of the privatization. They sold these things off at a fire sale, in part because there was also some debate as to like what days they would go on. And the city, I think, didn't want to deal with that. And so they sold it off to this hedge fund, essentially, for, I don't know, 10 cents on what of a dollar that it could make. And not only did they lose out in billions of dollars of revenue, future revenue, they also lost the ability to say, like, we're going to have a no parking meter day, downtown where you can go shopping or you can walk around or something, because they got to pay for the lost revenue.
Yeah, one of the worst examples of privatization ever, for sure. So it depends. The devil's in the details on this. What do they mean? Did they just put this and maybe this was the thing that Democrats caved on at the last minute, said, okay, fine, put this on the list of things that we'll consider as we're writing this legislation. But what actually gets into the legislation is going to be key. Like, are they going to sell off the Tennessee Valley Authority, like some people have suggested? Like, that would be insane. Or is it something fake? Like, not fake, but like one of the things was a 5G auction. So you do, which brings up a lot of what they're doing. They're finding things that they were going to do anyway,
right,
and attaching them to this.
Interesting. Okay, so 5G auction is just we see this sometimes with radio waves. We saw it with. It is basically just saying we're going to rent to you or lease to you long-term the ability to use the airwaves. And that's something that government has been doing for, I don't know, the advent of radio, I guess,
Right.
on some level. So, all right, with all that said, how real is this anyways? Like, what is going on? Because there's like multiple layers of how much this may not even be real in the first place. And like, I'm not even clear like who this is serving or what, but the Gang of 10 is at least five shy of where they need to be, right? And all of those five need to be Republicans. Just walk us through that dynamic.
See, not necessarily. And the political press corps is actually behind on this question because we're so used to saying that you need 60 votes, that we just assume that you need 60 votes on everything. But if you back up 1 second, like, why does this bipartisan deal necessarily need 60 votes? The only reason something needs 60 is if somebody filibusters it. No Democrats are going to filibuster this thing, even if they hate it in the end, because it would any Democrats who hate this are also Democrats who very strongly want to get rid of the filibuster. So they're not going to own themselves by then filibustering this bipartisan package. What about Republicans? Mitch McConnell so far is supportive of this package. Lindsey Graham today said, I'm out. And so everybody's like, well, this thing's dead. Lindsey Graham was never in. This is a fake thing that Lindsey Graham does. He like positions himself right at the margin of a deal, and then he pulls himself out at the last second to show that he's tough. He wasn't one of those five Republicans at the White House. Lindsey Graham did not say that he's going to filibuster it. So you need one Republican to filibuster it to require 60. So maybe you get one. Maybe Ted Cruz thinks that his path to the presidency is to filibuster this bipartisan infrastructure bill. But I don't know. I don't see the political upside in that, because all of these Republicans know that if the bipartisan deal fails, then there's just more gasoline for the partisan one, for the reconciliation one. So I don't particularly think they're actually going to go ahead and filibuster this, which means with those five Republicans, you're up 55-45 right now. Rob Portman was actually asked on CNBC this morning, saying like, why would you agree to this bipartisan deal when Democrats are going to ram through $6 trillion in spending at the same time? He's like, look, they were going to do reconciliation anyway. That's not on me. This bipartisan bill, I hope, takes some fuel, takes some energy away from their reconciliation package, but they're going to do what they're going to do. I asked Richard Burr, who's kind of retiring, and he's on the fence on all this stuff. I was like, does your vote hinge at all on whether they do a second one? He's like, no, it hinges on whether the deal is good. I don't have any say in what they do after that.
Well, so why would McConnell not, encourage a filibuster, though? I mean, what you're saying is all incredibly logical, but McConnell always, his first instinct is to obstruct, and then he can deal with, potentially peeling off Manchin or Sinema from the bigger reconciliation package later, right? So I think a lot of what you say makes sense, but it flies in the face of what we know of Mitch McConnell.
He's kind of in a tough spot because of the reconciliation option. If there wasn't that option on the table, absolutely, he just kills this. And he's like, forget it, everybody filibuster this. But if he filibusters, so not only does this $1.2 billion package just immediately get moved over into reconciliation, all the bad things that Republicans negotiated in it that they actually do want, those get taken out. Then you move let's say the $800 billion that's good, and you move that into reconciliation, and then Democrats go to Biden. Democrats go to Manchin and Sinema, and they're like, look, we told you, you struck a deal with these clowns. They showed up at the White House. They were backslapping. They were giggling. And Mitch McConnell blew it up anyway. The filibuster is useless. We need to get rid of it. All the filibuster does is empower McConnell. So he wouldn't get the policy outcome that he wants, because Democrats would still pass an infrastructure package and a bigger one at that. And he would fuel the end of the filibuster. So I think he's kind of in a jam here where he doesn't have a whole lot of good options and I wonder if he's a little gun shy about his stupidity right before Georgia. Remember, I'm sure if he could go back and cut a $2,000 check in December to everybody and hold on to the Senate, he would happily do that. It's not his money, but he was overconfident. He thought that he could shut this down and he could still hold on to the Senate, and he lost it. So I don't know if he wants a replay of that. And his caucus remembers that too.
Folks, there's more of what you've just saw where that came from. That's if you hit the subscribe and like button. Thank you. Really, thank you.